Cuisine in Tolkien's Middle-earth. JRR Tolkien has put much effort into creating a rich and developed world with many different races and creatures. Beside being connected by beautiful and complex languages created by the author, or by unique geographical locations, a significant aspect that is often forgotten about is the cuisine. Food and cuisine is one of the things in Tolkien's Middle-earth that grounds the story and lets the audience relate to the things the heroes are going through on a more personal level. Although varied between each race and location portrayed in the tale, the foods consumed by the characters are often familiar to the foods we eat on a daily basis, basing their origins in simple rustic dishes, cooked over open fire or in cauldrons. Tolkien during the Great War. One does not have to think long to figure out why food plays such a big and descriptive role in the tales of Middle-earth. Even though The Lord of the Rings was released well into Tolkien's career, the story started growing in his early life when he was enlisted as a lieutenant in the British Army during the First World War. Conditions during the war were rough, and many people could only dream about luxuries they could afford to have before it began. For Tolkien, one of these luxuries was food. Cuisine is one of those things that reminds one of home. It is filled with history and tradition, harnessing our most dear events and memories. It was a piece of home that, during the time of the war, was missing. This is partly the reason why throughout the story, during its most intimate moments of friendship and camaraderie, the characters are bonding through food and song. Hobbits. Hobbits resemble people the most in terms of the cuisine they have a particular fondness of, resulting in them being able to gather and explore some of the rarer delicacies. We get a glimpse of what hobbits usually eat right at the beginning of The Hobbit, where a vast selection of foods and drinks in Bilbo's chamber gets plundered by Thorin's company of dwarves. That moment gives us plenty to marvel at. Chicken, eggs, pickles are only some of the foods that Bilbo had ready, in addition to pies of many flavors. Hobbits were most likely the most equipped when it comes to food, its hoarding and preparation, due to their personal traits and their geographical location. It is in fact a stronghold of culinary endeavors, which allowed them to have many times a day that they would dedicate to eating. Elevensies, luncheon, afternoon tea, and supper would be some of them, while dinner they would always eat twice if they could. The Shire is situated to the west of Middle-earth, putting it further away from danger than anybody else they could consider allies. In terms of their culinary habits, their neighbors in Bree are humans that do not differ in diet from the Hobbits, although putting less priority on food. Hobbits are a very self-sufficient race. They do not need to worry about using their resources in arming their citizens, as military conflicts are seldom within the Shire. This means that any trading that would be taking place between them and any surrounding towns would be more often than not to acquire more food. Rangers of the North played a significant part in protecting the territories of the Shire and its surroundings, keeping the forces of evil at bay. In addition to the rangers that were protecting the Shire and its surroundings, towards the eastern side is the home of Tom Bombadil, an entity that guards the Old Forest and its territories, making it difficult for enemy forces to penetrate through, even from somewhere as neighboring as Bree. Because of the safety of this positioning, hobbits were able to cultivate lands and focus on gardening and herding. Men. The closest to hobbits, and by default to the real world in terms of cuisine, would be the humans of Middle-earth. The humans were surprisingly not mentioned above hobbits as the closest to our real cuisine, simply because they do not eat in abundance as the hobbits, and are frequently restricted only to what's immediately available. While the hobbits are residing in Bree when waiting for Gandalf, we can see that the inn, the Prancing Pony, offers people not only the finest beers one could get, but also a satisfying variety of food. As Samwise Gamgee has recalled, there was soup, cold meats, a blackberry tart, new loaves, slabs of butter, and half a ripe cheese. And that, in and of itself, is a delicious and filling meal. This was likely to take place in other areas inhabited by humans, and what they would be able to eat was similar between them all, varying at times due to differences in the culture or region. The difference between this and the food and cuisine of Gondor and the people of Minas Tirith would be significantly different due to their locations and cultures. Minas Tirith was heavily militarized, as it was the closest to the forces of evil, acting as a shield against it, and preventing its spread to the western part of Middle-earth. This prevented the inhabitants of putting priority on cuisine and lands, whereas the people of Rohan would be very different. Rohan and its people were well known for their relationship with horses and the collective effort they put to breed and maintain them. This would mean that the lands they have available to farm and tend to animals would be significantly greater than that of their neighbors, and they would have a much broader variety of meats in their cuisine. Hence, we see stews being mentioned frequently when the feasts of Rohan are being written about. Even though a majority of foods and supplies would be grown by local people themselves, there would still be traders and travelers that would occupy markets and trade for food from lands far away. It is a shame as an audience that we did not have a chance to read or see more of the regions of Harad, Run, and the east of Middle-earth in general. It would certainly be interesting to see, as it is a land far away from where the events of the story take place. Therefore, it would provide more of a contrast between that and what we are already familiar with. From what we can read of the East, through its invaders, or the Mumakil they ride, is that it is a region mostly resembling a desert, which would mean the cuisine its natives would be accustomed to would be severely different from what we've seen so far. Elves. It can be said that elves usually stick to the lighter dishes, and so some may think that the elves as a race are vegetarian, but this is not so. In Children of Húrin, it is mentioned that at the table of Thingol, foods and meats were present. It is difficult to imagine elves putting many meats into their diet because of their connection with nature. Elves as a race have a particular fondness of all living things, even putting effort into their relationship with trees and the plants of the forest, marveling at their beauty when possible. Therefore, it is hard to believe that they would willingly slaughter animals for food if the majority of their diet is plant-based already. During the capturing of the dwarves by Thranduil, the dwarves are hidden by Bilbo in many empty barrels, suggesting that the elves were also actively trading with other races, which could explain how they could occasionally enjoy meats without having to slaughter animals themselves. One well-known dish that is usually associated with the elves is the lembas bread. Lembas plays a significant role in The Lord of the Rings, not only because it is a highly nutritious food that kept the heroes of the story alive during the key hardships they had to face along their journey, but also because it is used as a symbol of friendship, trust, and faith. During their visit in Lothlorien, the members of the Fellowship receive lembas as a gift from the elves of the forest, a deed that is seldom seen anywhere else. Despite the Fellowship consisting of members that are not usually friendly with elves, and ones that could show weakness in times of trial, the elves still decided to put trust in the quest and offer their friendship in the form of lembas. It is easy to be mistaken and think that lembas is an everyday food for the elves, and that it is often included in their diet, but that is not so. Only the Noldor are able to gift the bread to others, and it is only meant to be given to sustain long travels and in healing injuries. At times we can extract plenty of information and answers from the short passages in text that are easy to miss. We get a view in elven culinary differences after the green elves of Osiriand tell Finrod, while describing other more distant of the elven race, that these folks are hewers of trees and hunters of beasts, therefore we are their unfriends, and if they will not depart, we shall afflict them in all ways that we can. By this, we see that even though they belong to the same race, the way they interact with nature and the relationship with the environment is very different between them. Tolkien not only created many developed and individual races, but also created sub-factions within them, adding to the detail and sophistication in its creation. Dwarves. We do not often see dwarves hosting dinner events where they share food and use it to bond with other races. Dwarves are quite secretive and private with their possessions, mainly jewels and treasures, and they rarely are keen to share with others. The dwarves' situation in regards to their cuisine is a little different from all the other races that inhabit the lands. Dwarves have no lands that would be suitable for farming or harvesting, as they mostly live within cold and rocky mountains, making it extremely hard to cultivate any plants or livestock. But that does not put dwarves in a disadvantage, and does not mean that they are likely to starve. Dwarves spend much time mining within their mountains, excavating endless treasures in the form of jewels and gold. This puts them at an advantage in any trading situation, as the items they are exporting are much more valued than anything the other races could offer, besides maybe the elves, with which the dwarves were quite reluctant to trade, due to their complicated history. Because dwarves rely on trading to secure their food supplies, they would usually be restricted to trading with their local neighbors for a majority of their resources, and would open their cuisine and palate to what was available. preventing them from bonding with other dwarves through shared traditional food that simply did not exist. Dwarves were particularly fond of cram bread that was given to them by the men of Dale and Laketown, as it is a stout and nutritious bread that sustains for long journeys, exactly what people like dwarves would need. We get a glimpse of how food was accessed and traded through the part in the story regarding Laketown. Many men, including Bard, were fishermen, and the city was filled with boats, as its location was on the water. Because these people did not have fields they could plow or use for herding animals, they had to resort to primarily fishing, which was their biggest export, that they would be able to trade between other towns. The boats we see that are cluttering every damp alley of the town are used for gathering the fish as well as for exporting them. Orcs. Orcs have a particularly gruesome diet, as it consists of any piece of flesh that is chewable. During the capture of the Hobbits, the Orcs put an emphasis on having the meat fresh, signifying that they do have some sort of standard in the food they eat, although the fresher the better. In The Hobbit, we read about a particularly sophisticated group of trolls that are debating on how they should cook the dwarves they have captured. They have different methods to preparing the dwarves, showing that they all have their different preferences, and their diet is not as barbaric as one might think. It is not known if orcs ever indulge in human food, but after comparing their diet to the creature Gollum, that eats only raw fish and meat, and seeing how repulsed he is to human food, it is safe to say that orcs are not interested in what others eat. During the time where Merry and Pippin are captured by the Uruk-hai after the defeat of Boromir in the woods of Parthgalen, we see the orc Ugluk force the hobbits to drink orc draught from their drink pouch. This drink instantly affects Pippin, while its burning taste spreads throughout his whole body. Although the flavor of the unnamed drink is almost unbearable, it did give Merry a boost of energy and rejuvenation, removing the injury from his legs, enabling him to walk. This could be an explanation for where the orcs are getting their energy from, and how they are able to withstand dire battle or travel conditions. The orc draught was not the only liquid that had rejuvenating powers in the world of Arda. Another powerful and significant drink that was also drunk by Merry and Pippin was the Ent draught that they received by Treebeard in the Fangorn forest. Treebeard mentions that the Ents drink the potion while laying down to prevent it getting into their heads too quickly. After drinking it, the hobbits not only get rejuvenated, but also they grow in height about 3 to 4 inches, enough to be regarded as the tallest hobbits in the Shire. The Ents date back much farther than the forces of Sauron, and seeing the similarities in the drinks they consume, it is possible that Sauron was inspired by the Ent draught to create his own drink of similar properties that could be used to fuel his armies. Although similar, the Ent draught is not to be confused with Miruvor, an elven water-like liquid that is served in Rivendell. It is not as potent, but has its own rejuvenating and healing abilities, and is created by the Elves. Apart from Miruvor, Elves are known to be accustomed to wines, which is their preference, whereas other races prefer beers and ales that are mentioned every time there is a feast, or any other form of celebration. Saruman's food supply. The importance of food can also be observed in the cold halls of Saruman's Orthanc. Saruman is presented as quite a dark and mysterious figure that is predominantly occupied with devising evil schemes and training his Uruk troops. So it is hard to imagine Saruman the White enjoying snacks in his free time between his plots, but that is exactly the case. During the drowning of Isengard in 3019 of the Third Age and defeat of Saruman's powers, Orthanc was occupied thanks to the brave effort of Treebeard and his Ent forces, allied with the guidance and determination of Merry and Pippin. After pillaging the tower, the hobbits find a secret pantry full of food and supplies. The food inside ranged from cheeses to ales and pipeweed. One of the more interesting supplies found in Saruman's stash were barrels of South Farthing weed. Based on the date of the barrels and the location of origin, it leads Aragorn to believe that Saruman had dealing with someone in the Shire. From what we are aware, Saruman was mostly occupying Orthanc alone. The orcs that would occasionally visit the tower with news on progress would not be interested in human food. And the other person that we are aware of, whom was often seen in Orthanc, was Grima Wormtongue, Saruman's servant, although he would be spending the majority of his time in Rohan while manipulating King Theoden through the powers of Saruman. This leads us to conclude that Saruman, the most powerful of the Astari Order at that time, entity sent by the godly powers of the world to aid in rescuing it from the evil clutches of Morgoth, had a secret personal stash of food with the finest snacks around that he could enjoy on his own. Even Bilbo would be jealous of such a rich pantry. In conclusion, we give you one of Thorin Oakenshield's quotes that encapsulates the importance of cuisine in Tolkien's Middle-earth. If more of us valued food and cheer and song above hoarded gold, it would be a merrier world. What diet of Middle-earth would you likely be following? Is there any Lord of the Rings food that you would like to eat? Be sure to let us know in the comments below.